In this video, I'm going to show how to replace the front brakes on this Toyota Corolla. Pads and rotors located right behind your front wheels. Let's get started. With the vehicle safely raised and supported, if the vehicle has hubcaps on the wheels, remove them simply by prying them out. At this point, whether you have hubcaps or not, you're going to use a 21mm socket to remove all 5 lug nuts and then remove the wheel. With those off, remove the wheel. Now from the back side of the caliper, we can see our bleeder screw right here, which I will take the cap off of. And then with an 8mm wrench, I'll be opening up in a little bit, have either a collection bucket underneath, or in my case, I have this bottle with a hose attached to it that will collect all my brake fluid. With that attached, I'll open the bleeder. And I'm doing this so that I can squeeze the piston of the caliper back in through this opening. I'm using a small pry bar. You could use a small screwdriver if that's what you have. Just pry in on that. There we go. That completely bottomed out the piston. Now this confirms a couple things. One, I know my piston is working smoothly. The caliper is not bad. So are the slider pins, because I was able to move the caliper back and forth. If either of those are stuck, that would require replacement of the caliper. I have a hose on here that's now full of brake fluid, so I'm not worried about air getting into the system. But if you didn't have that and you're draining this into a collection bucket, just give it about 5 seconds for a clean, steady drip of fluid to come out and no air bubbles. Now, close the bleeder screw, snug it, and if you used anything like this, remove the collection receptacle. With brake parts cleaner if necessary, wipe off the area and a clean rag and cap off the bleeder screw. With a 14mm wrench or ratchet and socket, remove the 2 bolts holding the caliper onto the bracket on these slider pins. With them broken free, you should be able to remove them by hand. With the caliper freed up, I'm going to flip it over, inspect the piston and the boot area. If it's wet, that means the seal is bad and that needs to be replaced, the whole caliper that is. This boot for me is pushed out a little bit. It should be folded in like that. Now that happens because air gets trapped behind it, which is not a problem, it happens. So I'm going to take a pocket screwdriver and very carefully lift up on the boot, press it in, there we go. That will allow the air to release, and that is seated back in. At this point, I'm going to take a hook, hang the caliper from right here onto the strut. I don't want to put any pressure on the brake hose by letting it hang on it. Take off the pads, slide them out of the bracket. Now with a 17mm socket, we'll remove these 2 bolts that hold the bracket onto the knuckle. Leave that threaded in partially and remove the top one. And finish removing the bottom one. Pull the bracket off. At this point, your rotor should be able to be pulled off. Now, a lot of times it does get stuck on the hub. This is just rust holding it on here. So what you can do is try to hammer it with a hammer, tap right between the lug studs, making sure you don't hit them so you don't damage them. That should break it free. If that still doesn't do the trick, spray a little bit of rust penetrant, and then we'll use 2 M8 by 125 bolts to push the rotor off the hub. There are 2 holes that are designed for these bolts on the rotor. Use whatever size socket happens to fit your bolts that you're using. Just tighten them up one at a time. There we go. And remove the rotor. Hopefully yours comes off a lot easier, but that exposes all this corrosion that we have on the hub that was holding it on. We definitely have to clean all of this. So for me, I'll use a sanding disc and get this all cleaned up, as well as a wire wheel on my drill just to get in the tighter to reach areas. Use whatever works for you. You could even use a hand wire brush if the rust and corrosion isn't too bad on yours. All you want to do though is keep this surface nice and flat and clean. Don't gouge it or don't take away any of the metal that's on this hub. You just want to remove the rust, corrosion, and debris. Once you're done with a collection bucket underneath, rinse it all with brake parts cleaner to get off all the oils and debris, and then apply a thin coating of anti-seize that'll prevent corrosion from building up in the future. With that coated, bring the rotor in and put it on backwards temporarily right over that collection bucket. Spray the outer braking surface with brake parts cleaner just to degrease it. You don't want any oils or debris on there. Once it's dry, take it, flip it over, install it the right way. And just to make it stay, otherwise it's going to keep moving around just like that, I'm going to use a lug nut and thread it on hand tight all the way. And now spray the braking surface on the outer part with brake parts cleaner. With our caliper bracket on the workbench, let's remove the old anti-rattle clips so we can clean underneath them. Typically you can pry these up with a little screwdriver or pry bar. We have to clean this corrosion up with a wire brush, which is what usually does the trick. Now, if yours is severe for some reason, you could use a little bit of sandpaper or a file to get this off of here, but you want to be careful. What you don't want to do though is use something extremely abrasive so that you remove too much material from here. That would be an issue. I'm actually just going to go in with a wire wheel on a drill to speed up the process, but use whatever works for you. Once you're done cleaning, rinse this off with brake parts cleaner. Apply a thin layer of silicone paste that's rated for brakes. The anti-rattle clips need to get hooked in the correct way, so with the spring and the hook facing towards the outer parts of the caliper and also on the inboard side, not the outboard side. Press them in all the way. And with both of these done, do the same to the other side of the bracket. Now you want to remove your slider pin. Do this one at a time because one of them will have this rubber sleeve, the other one will not, so they need to go back exactly where they came from. I'm going to add a thin coating of silicone paste or brake grease to the pin itself. You can't put too much on it or it'll just get wiped off as it gets inserted into the caliper bracket. And I'm going to take some of that silicone paste and add it inside the boot. This is going to create a nice reserve of grease for the pin to be lubricated for a long time. Then take that lubricated pin, slide it in the caliper bracket. You'll notice that there's air trapped behind it that if it doesn't come out of the boot, that's okay. Press on the pin and squeeze the boot and that'll squeeze all the air out. Make sure this slides smoothly, which it does, so that's great. Do the same to the other pin. Take your caliper bracket, line it up with the front knuckle, slide in the bolts and start them in by hand. Torque these bolts to 79 foot-pounds. The brake pads will have these spring type wear indicators that need to get hooked on one end of the pad, and you want to make sure that the hook part or the bend faces the back of the pad and the end of it where it's cut faces the pad material, the front of the pad. Make sure that's seated completely. Now, however you put these on, you want to make sure that the wear indicator is on the top of the bracket. So if this was your outboard pad like that, it would sit on the top. For the inboard pad, you'd have to make sure you put it on the other end. Now let's put in our brake pads, making sure that the wear indicator goes on the top of the bracket. Slide them in at an angle, push and twist. Make sure they're seated. There we go. Make sure they move smoothly and they're not bound up. Take your caliper, slide it over the bracket and the pads. Make sure it's fully seated and start in the 2 bolts that hold it on. With these bottomed out, torque them to 25 foot-pounds. Reinstall the wheel. Start on all 5 lug nuts, bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 76 foot-pounds. "76 foot-pounds in a cross pattern, here we go. Double check them all. If your wheels had hubcaps, put them back on. Just make sure you line up the cutout with the valve stem so it can actually go on. Pump up the brake pedal, top off the master cylinder, and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.